Pammy,
comparatively.
are we ready?
I believe that we are. We're
Okay.
ready, so let me get this little guy running. We're good?
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask for a quick roll call, please.
6:02. Certainly, okay. Jackie Whitsitt,
Here.
Gary Tenenbaum, Bill Infante, Katie Schwer.
Here.
Auden Schendler,
Here.
Jennifer Riffle, Ryan Slack.
Here.
Okay, thank you. I just want to announce that I am not really feeling up to snuff tonight and would not be here except for the fact that without me, there would not be a quorum. And so I have asked Auden Schendler to chair this meeting, and he has kindly agreed to do so between raspberries. So I'm going to turn it over to Auden, and I will just be here on account of.
Could we
Yes.
just get a motion from council?
Oh, yes, we needed a motion. Could I get a motion to do that? To let,
Motion for Auden to serve as mayor.
to chair, yeah,
Is that what you need?
yes.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I just stay here?
It might be easier if you come here, just
Okay.
because it's hard enough to see what's happening out there. So does that want to hide over here?
Okay.
I'll be Gary.
All right, well, grassroots, thank you as usual. What's your name? Ian. Ian, thank you, Ian. We'll try to talk into the mic. Let's start, consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 2A and 2B.
Second.
Further discussion? One quick question, Ryan. That River Park LLC continuation,
Yes.
fine, but I thought we were going to talk about it tonight. Is that just they needed to?
It was a continuation where, the next step on that, if you recall, is that we're gonna be, looking at the financials, for it, and, we're, probably won't have that completed at the 22nd either, so we're looking at the first meeting in February, to have that review totally completed, and we'll be able to share all that information with you.
Okay. Okay, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, call to the public. This is public comment on items unrelated to the agenda today. If you have anything to say, come on down. Jerry.
Excuse me. Thanks for listening to me. I come here tonight to make an apology. I said in a previous meeting that a council member who reported that his office window looked out on the river park, the RFDC parcel, could not be correct because his office window did not actually face the park. I visited Auden's office to make that observation, but did not enter it because he was not there, and observed from outside the door that the window faced south, across the parking lot, toward the other gold medal building. That is how I arrived at my conclusion. Subsequently, I have gone to the office when Auden was there and was able to see that it is not difficult to look over the table in the office and turn to the west to look at the park. I regret that I made it sound like Auden was lying, and I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. That's much appreciated. Other public comment?
Good man.
Okay. Any comments about Basalt? Is that a separate item? Anybody? No? Okay, mayor and council reports and comments. Council? Nothing? Madam?
Yes, I have one thing, which is, we skied at the Roaring Fork Club this weekend, and to my memory, it's been years that they have groomed that course out there, so I don't know if it was Gary or who helped make that happen, but it's greatly appreciated because that was in their approval that they would do that, and it's very nice out there.
And I was corrected, that Gary, I believe, made a phone call, and Katie, who is the group that does the grooming out there?
Well, the Nordic
Oh,
Council,
the
but I
Nordic
don't know if Nordic Council does grooming for the Roaring Fork
Oh, okay,
Club.
okay.
I think they might have to do it on their own, but the Nordic Council's been grooming down to the Emma School.
Okay. So in case it's them, I wanted to just make sure we called them out to thank them for that effort too.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, I'll pass it along
Yeah.
if it was them. I'll ask.
Okay.
Any other council comments? I've got two quick things. Green Team met to discuss what to do with the $50,000 for building energy audits and implementation. We met with CORE and Holy Cross that both want to participate. And the plan is that we want to try to electrify this building as a model for the valley and the world. Electrification using renewable energy is how we're going to solve the climate problem. So that's a priority. And then a second priority is going to be to find a big energy user, probably in the public realm like a school, and do an energy audit, and then amass money from CORE and Holy Cross and try to implement and save a bunch of money and also be a demonstration project. So the reason I bring it up is that's probably how we're going to ask to allocate funds, and you all are going to have to decide. If you have any concerns now, let me know so that we can go forward without hitch. Okay. And then the second thing is just for a future meeting. This building is kind of gross. And it's not even, you know, I'm pretty minimalist and I don't care about aesthetics, but when I go meet with you and there's a little like fist-sized yucca plant on the table and that's the only thing that brings any ambiance to it, it's depressing. So I just like, you know, I don't want to waste public funds, but the windows are like covered in mud, you know? We need to, there's some things I think we could do to just make staff's lives happier and better. And we discussed maybe whether there was funding for replacing the windows, which is a piece of that. And the reason this came up to me is that if we electrify this building, we're gonna have to replace the boiler, but we're probably then gonna have to look at baseboard heating, and it's gonna require a little renovation. And while we're at it, let's paint the cinder blocks or whatever.
Yeah.
So again, I'm hoping there's council support for that kind of thing, and Ryan will talk about money.
Yeah. And I can look into bigger yuccas in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
It's my Spartan, decorations.
Grapefruit salad.
Okay,
Yeah.
manager's report.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple things. Wanted to make sure I said thank you to the Public Works crews. They've done a great job at snow removal this year. We've had a lot more snow and more regular storm events, so they've really been working hard to keep our sidewalks and roads clear and clean. And I think they should be commended on that. So I made sure to pass that along to Boyd from staff, but wanted to make sure I announced it here as well. And then a quick update, I did not put it in my Friday update, but as it relates to the flooding mitigation work, so that is moving forward. Right before Christmas, we went out with Eagle County, DOW, and town staff, as well as SGM, who's going to be helping us with the engineering and project management on it. We visited every single site and got some ideas on how to tackle the issues. So one other piece of good news, as I had shared with you before, we received the grant through the feds, through NRCS, for covering 75% of that cost. The state then stepped up and gave us 12.5%, or half of the local match. We were also planning on doing plenty of in-kind work, so I'm hoping that the private property owners will be able to get that mitigation done without any cost to them. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that as the plans get developed for it. We are able to move ahead with some of the planning and signing of documents. despite the furloughs that are happening at the federal level, they have some critical employees that are still there and keeping the lights on. So that project is moving forward, and I'll keep you updated on that. And then I have not actually put my eyeballs on it, Councilor Schendler, but the tiny library was picked up from the art base. It was sealed and I believe installed in Linear Park. So we have our first.
Seen it.
You saw it?
Saw people using it.
Awesome.
Oh,
So it's a really cool, I can't tell you what a great job the art base did on painting it. It was great. And I think it was a group of maybe fourth graders that had come in and worked on it. Yep, over a couple weeks, so it looks pretty awesome.
I consider that in the category of mythical animal. I'll believe it when I see it. And just out of curiosity, is the library stocking it?
Well, when we purchased that particular library, it did come with some books, so we put those in there. And so we can go and check on it and just see if they're being rotated out and new books are finding their way in there, so. So the library's not
Thank
participating
you.
at the moment.
Thank you for all your work on that.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's all I have.
all right, thank you. Christie, quarterly financials, third quarter presentation?
Yes, let's see. So I'm not going to belabor this report because I believe we've pretty much reviewed the year-to-date information at the last budget review. So that was our last council meeting. So really not a lot has changed from then to now. And this quarterly report, just so you're aware, had been presented to the Finance Committee already. So they didn't have very many questions. They had a lot of good questions, but nothing that didn't make sense to them. So they liked the format and all those kind of things. So got a lot of good feedback from them as well, and input and response. So when you look at on the second page, yeah, you scroll down on a thing and you do, yeah, there you go. And then, yeah, keep going down. There you go. Ooh, okay, sorry, it's a little bit small, so hopefully everybody could read that. But I'll explain some of the numbers too. So on the left-hand side, the first page is really your general fund. Left-hand side is the revenues, expenditures on the right-hand side. And it's a budget versus actual comparison with the percentage of the budget on the third column in each revenue and expenditures. And so when you look at your taxes, the biggest things that really stick out to me on those is, number one is looking at our cigarette taxes, quite a bit over what we had budgeted, but that's because we just passed the cigarette tax. And it looks like we could have collected close to 100,000 this year. So that's good on that piece. What was that?
Or bad.
Oh,
Yes.
And then property tax, pretty much looking at fully collected, which is pretty normal for this time of year. The sales tax we know is a little bit down compared to budget, and so that hasn't changed from the prior report. When you look at 3/4 of the year being done, 76% is pretty close to 3/4 of the year overall. So it looks fairly good from that perspective. When you look at our license and permit fees, we're running pretty close to budget on our building permits, which are unrestricted funds. That's the important part. I would say the licensing and permitting is the unrestricted portion because that's really what we would look at from an operational standpoint. The restricted funds usually aren't budgeted at a high level until a receipt. So that's really the reason why a lot of our restricted fees that we have, 394,000, actually collected through September 30 versus 13,000 budgeted. And so that's all related to just basic restricted fees for specific purposes. So that's the reason why we are over budget on our revenues in that category. Let's see, under the intergovernment revenues for highway tax, We did get some, a good payment of highway user tax fee, and that's probably gonna continue, so that one is going to be favorable to budget, with the other ones about, where anticipated to be coming in at budget. Service charges are a smaller portion of our budget. The miscellaneous charges in there are internal fees, so those will just be a journal entry in there, so that, don't think that that's a fact that we haven't collected a lot of that $614,000 budgeted there. We're going to journal that in, and that's transfers between funds kind of thing, okay? And let's see here, and the interest, we know is gonna run actually ahead of budget, and refund of expenditures as well, although I still have some reconciliations to do. The expenditures by department are running fairly where we would anticipate them being, so I don't anticipate anything problematic in that area. Any questions on the general fund? Okay. On the bond fund, I love the bond fund because it's just pretty much in and out, interest and principal payments, and that's just gonna be right on budget, with both, the tax side and revenues in and your expenditures out. That's just based upon what we know on our amortization schedule. Our water fund, is, looking like our water service fees are actually running ahead of budget, which we still anticipate to happen through the end of the year. We had some adjustments, so we had to mark that number down a little bit after we had reconciled that, but still, it's running fairly positive to budget. As are some of the TAP fees and other restricted funding sources too, because those, once again, are not budgeted until they're collected, because we don't really know what that's going to be, okay? Let's see, expenditures are gonna be pretty close to budget once we do that transfer that I was talking about on the administrative side, and just the expenditures expected through the end of the year, we're probably gonna run right about at budget. And then looking at the Conservation Trust Fund, no expenditures out this year, and just continuing to increase that slightly each year for our lottery funds, revenues. Okay? Any questions?
This is a great layout, thank you.
Oh, yeah, well, this was thanks to Lisa. So this was one of her last things she had done, and so it was, yeah. And, but I'm glad to continue the legacy, so. All right.
Any questions? Katie?
Nope.
It's great.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
We've collected a lot more than we thought in the tobacco tax. Ryan, have we adequately broadcast that some of that money is to be used to help people get off cigarettes?
I'd say no, not yet. You know, we started that tax mid-year 2018, and so we were not anticipating receiving that much, and so I think that's something that we can certainly address. And we've brainstormed a little bit about that internally as to how we might do that and what kind of uses. The money is, of course, restricted to certain uses surrounding, I think it was, generally speaking, public health and education, those types of things. So I think it can be fairly broadly used and put to use for good things in the community.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. First item tonight is a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance, Town Council granting special review site plan to the South Side Reach 2 ESA floodplain and community housing approvals for the development. This is 525 Basalt Avenue. Glenn, I noted that you sent us a letter asking for continuation. Jackie, is that, typically we'll grant that?
Sure, we don't have any reason not to.
Sure, come on up.
I'm Glenn Rappaport, representing Patrick Kilty for the application. So the staff called me about 4:30 and said they had 3 3/4 council people. And,
Am I the half, I guess?
I was gonna give you the 3/4. But, and so I was kind of being a little light with the idea that I know the packet's pretty large, and there's a lot of issues there to discuss. So we were hoping that we could maybe postpone and for 2 weeks.
So if that's what you want to do, that's fine, but my sense was in part that I hate to delay you, so if you feel comfortable going, that's fine, but,
Well, the staff, I talked with staff, and, you know, they were kind of saying that, given the circumstances, there's floodplain issues, there's other issues, and it may be better to have the benefit of as many council people as possible.
Could we just ask Susan for some language for the motion?
sure.
We would just need a motion to continue the first reading and public hearing on ordinance 01/2019 to January 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Does one of us need to make it, or?
She made it.
Oh, you made it?
Did it?
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
Hey, sorry we couldn't muster a full group for you.
It'll still be winter when we come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is water rate, charges. Ryan?
Yeah, so this is an ordinance that just modifies our, the town code to update the fee schedule for water rates. And it doesn't increase the rates over what we had already approved in the 2018 budget by ordinance. So it's just more or less a housekeeping issue that we're doing here.
So it's greater than last year's increases? It's the same?
Same,
We just have to re-adopt them every year?
Yeah, it's the fee schedule, and it has to be done by ordinance. And so we had put those in the budget for 2018 and adopted that by ordinance, and then this will just reflect that into the code. So this will be the actual code change.
Got it.
Before there's any discussion on this agenda item, if we could just make sure for the record that the title of the ordinance is read into the record.
Okay. Shall I do that?
Yes.
This is first reading of ordinance number 2, series 2019.
The whole thing?
And the
Oh,
title.
an ordinance of the town council of the town of Basalt approving water rate changes pursuant to section 1327 of the town code.
47.
It's 47?
47 what?
1347.
Oh, it's just wrong in the,
Oh, is it wrong on the ordinance? Oh,
I thought it had to be 47.
just makes sense.
yeah, 1347, yes.
Okay. No worries. This is not a public meeting, so I'll entertain a motion.
I motion that the town council approve ordinance number 2, series of 2019 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for January 22nd, 2019.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next up is first reading of ordinance number 3, series of 2019, an ordinance of the town council of the town of Basalt, amending chapter 11, article 13, excavations of the municipal code to enact an additional condition that may be imposed on the work performed under a street excavation permit in order to promote deployment of telecommunications resources. Holy boring.
So point of clarification, if I may ask, ask Jeff, is, so in this, we have both an ordinance and a resolution. Is it okay to go ahead and talk about the ordinance first?
We can talk about them both, but
Okay.
there need to be separate actions on
Yes,
them.
correct.
And we can discuss that in more
Order of
detail.
which?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just talk about generally what we're doing here. So as I said, you have a resolution before you as well, and that resolution basically authorizes us to execute a memorandum of agreement with Cedar Networks. And so that would be the agreement that basically establishes our relationship whereby when we have an open trench in town, whether we're doing a street project or some other type of infrastructure, that we would start deploying the conduit to start building out ultimately a fiber optic network in town. That would be given to the town for free, and we would ultimately just start slowly but surely piecing that network together. And the other piece to that, which is also of benefit, is that we would receive from Cedar Networks some GIS data that we could add to our system that ultimately shows how that's being deployed over time. So it'll give information such as its location and the size of the pipe. Size of the pipe is going to be pretty consistent throughout at 2 inches, but the other piece that you should be aware of is they'll give us 2 sticks of pipe for each length that we put in. So one is one that they would put in, or one is one that they would own, and then we would own the other. We don't have a particular use for it right now, but in the future, if either new technology or we're wanting to deploy our own system of some sort, it doesn't cause us to have to dig up the roads again. And so essentially this is an arrangement with Cedar Networks, but they would, again, supply the pipe. We have it installed, and they give us the data to back it up. As it relates to the ordinance itself, it's a code change that basically, when somebody's getting a street cut permit to do some sort of work in our right of way or near our right of way, we can basically demand that as part of that they do the installation of the pipe. So that's the gist of it.
Any questions or comments from council?
Did I capture it fairly
Yeah, I think you
well,
got
Jeff?
it. The ordinance is the piece of legislation to make the code change to allow them to do it. The resolution approves an agreement with Cedar Networks to allow specifically them to do it, if that makes sense.
Just out of curiosity, if you do a long stretch like Main Street, this makes sense to me. If you're excavating a hole to repair a pipe, are you gonna do this too?
Yeah, sometimes, and usually, I think there's something in there, I think there was, did it say 100 feet? If it's a 10-foot stretch, we may not do it. Although if that 10-foot stretch does allow us to put something across of the road, to achieve, some kind of crossing, then we may. It's at our discretion, so that, we can ultimately determine whether it's a benefit or not. Because if you put in a 10-foot stretch along a road, yes, you're right, how many 10-foot stretches are you gonna have to do to finally get there? But it gives us the authority to decide if it's appropriate or not.
It's like building your house when you have bricks, like, oh, I got another brick,
Right.
I'll put it in the house.
Found another.
All right. Any other comments from council? Jeff, do you need me to read in the resolution as well?
I would suggest council take action on the ordinance and then, as it's set out on the agenda. And then with respect to the resolution, you'll need to take a separate action, and I'll actually recommend that you continue that into the next meeting, so then the timing of the approvals of the ordinance and the resolution will sync up.
Because that can be approved on one vote? Or,
Because the resolution does not need a second reading.
got it.
So.
Okay, Susan, did you have something?
Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 3, series of 2019 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for January 22nd, 2019.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay, so,
Do you want a
resolution-
motion to continue?
Do I need to read it?
Mayor, I move the town council continue resolution number 1, series of 2019 to January 22nd,
Second.
2019.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Whoa.
Whoa.
Okay, Ryan, committee review.
Committee review, yes. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what I've been working on, kind of talk about why we are here, and give you a little bit better understanding of how we might proceed forward. So, as you recall, earlier in the year, we had a council retreat back in August. We talked a little bit about a communication strategy with our various committees. I'd heard feedback both from council and from committee members that the communication maybe was lacking. There wasn't clear direction. They didn't feel like they had clear direction from council, and council was feeling like there needed to be more frequent interaction just so that they could understand the progress they're making on given tasks, or to provide some direction or give them tasks. So really quickly, I want to start with the charter. So the town's charter basically gives council the ability to establish boards and commissions. There are two different types of boards and commissions you can do. One is a temporary board or commission, and that's usually set up to advise council on a specific matter or accomplishing a specific task. So it's kind of a task-directed and usually short-term. Those are always approved by resolution when you set those up. And the resolution in those needs to specifically describe the advice to be provided or the task to be accomplished. And also, council may establish, consolidate, merge, or abolish these groups by resolution, okay? The second kind, which is really what all of our committees and boards are it seemed to be intended for anyway, and I'll get to that in a minute, are more permanent in nature. The council still has the ability to modify them, abolish them, consolidate them, merge them, what have you. But those have to be approved by ordinance according to our charter. In both of the instances, whether it's a permanent or a temporary board or commission, the ordinance or resolution needs to provide a few things. So what the powers and duties of this board would be, the required qualifications of its membership, the terms of office, and the methods of appointment. In both instances, the charter cites that the council makes appointments to fill vacancies or unexpired terms, but it's silent on who actually does the appointing. So usually in the ordinances that we do have, it specifies that the council does that. So we clarify that when we go through adopting those. It talks about the fact that all the meetings need to be open to the public, and that copies of all the minutes or records of those meetings have to be held by the town clerk for inspection by the public. And it also contemplates that reports are made to the town council, and that's at the town council's discretion when they want them. And then finally, that a vote of a majority of a quorum is considered to be a vote of the entire commission or board. So that's really all the charter lays out and kind of gives general direction on how those go. The next thing that I worked on was this spreadsheet that you guys have, that I took all of the information that I could find for the various boards and commissions that we have. So just to go over what those are, so we have the Post, the Parks, Open Space and Trails. We've got the Vale Board. We've got BPAC, which is the Public Arts Commission. We've got BAC, which deals with affordable housing. We've got a Finance Committee. We've got the Green Team. We have the Basalt Emergency Management, is it Commission? Committee, thank you. We have the Basalt Chamber Sign Committee, which is really under the chamber, but our staff participates in that, because those signs end up going on public property. And then, of course, we have two that are a little different, and set up differently, which are the Planning Commission and the Zoning Adjustment Board. So, as you can see, there's quite a bit here, and I went through, as I was going through the information, I tried to pick out some things that were common in the documents that established these groups. So things like a mission statement, when they were established, how the committee was formed, perhaps why the committee was formed, so what specific tasks might they have, or priorities. Talked about eligibility requirements for the membership, the composition, so what that means is, like, who is the board, who can the board be made of? Is it citizens only? Is it citizens and staff? Can there be other experts in a given field that don't necessarily live in town? Things of that nature. Are there specific timings for the appointments? So this is something that I would like to work on standardizing as well, and that, for example, the Finance Committee requires that appointments be made the first meeting after the general election, whereas the, I think it's the BOC gets appointed in January of every year. So there's not consistency there across the board. The other thing is the duration of tenure for the folks that are on there. Are there any conduct standards? So they're following Robert's Rules of Order, or something of those, something along those lines. And then what are the meeting schedules? And are the meetings recorded? Are there minutes? What do they call that out? And what sort of reporting requirements are there for them? And then lastly, is there a funding source? So some of ours, like Post as an example, we have a Post fund, which is our restricted fund from the 1% sales tax. And these folks are giving advice to the council on ideas for utilizing those funds to the public benefit. Others may not have funds specifically associated with them, like BOC, for example. BOC helps us more right now with advice, doing review on applications for land use and things of that nature. So a couple other things to just highlight on here are that over time, we've grown our number of committees. Some of them have gone through the processes outlined in our charter. Others have not. So, for example, the Vale Board, we just recently updated that ordinance, and that was done in alignment with what we see in the charter. Post, on the other hand, was one that, as far as the information that I was able to gather on that, was put together in the past, perhaps by the town manager, by town council, and so there was no formalization of that group. And so I think one of the exercises that we could go through to add a little bit of clarity to and expectations for each of these groups would be to standardize the model a little bit, just so that it helps staff out, it helps the committee volunteers out, as well as you all, and sets out expectations for how we need to interact and how we need to get information. So that takes me to my next piece of information that is in the packet, which is a template, and this template is in draft form only at the moment, but it is essentially a bylaws template, okay? And it would align with what the charter requires for different aspects that have to be in there according to our charter, but I'll highlight just a few. So first, the first part, I talked about the role. So what are the roles and responsibilities? Why is this committee, why does it exist, and what should they be focusing on, working on? The second piece of that was to add some member guidelines, some expectations for committee members. Now, mind you, these bylaws would be handed out to volunteers that get onto a committee just so they understand a little bit better what their roles are. A couple of things to highlight in here is that the boards and commissions should work on projects that are included in their yearly work programs or assigned by town council or the town manager only. If they wanted to go outside of that and propose something new, we have a caveat in here that they could come back to the town council to ask for that permission, but we really want them to be focusing on the things that come from town council. And that the boards and commissions, they're making recommendations ultimately to the town council. They're not the ultimate decision maker. And so those recommendations might be accepted, they might be altered, or they might be rejected altogether. So it just kind of sets out those expectations a bit. And then the third thing that I have in here, which is one of the final that I'll really highlight, but was the communication strategy that we developed coming out of our retreat. And so it sets about sort of guidelines for when boards and commissions should be engaging with town council initially. We decided that around budget time, June, July timeframe, they'll engage with council, whether that's at a retreat or at a town council meeting. And then that way, they can present ideas that we can then begin to contemplate in our budget as we move that forward. And then they would come back sometime in the beginning of the year after the budget is adopted to interact once again and kind of set out a time frame and schedule and update the council on how those ideas are beginning to take shape. After that, they'll do quarterly check-ins or so with council just to brief you all on what the progress being made is and if there's any input from council along the way. Then we added just a couple things in here where the town's webpage, that we'd maintain the information on all of the committees in there, and that would be up to staff, and that the town manager can update the town council on the activities of boards and commissions, whether that be through a weekly report or at council meetings. So just so that we kind of maintain that communication, kind of keep things at the forefront for you all. And after that, so that kind of summarizes more or less what the communication strategy is there. And then it goes through and there's some blanks to be filled in here. So it talks about the meetings. So when will these committees hold their regular meetings? What's their membership look like? In other words, how long are their terms? How do we solicit candidates? Things along those lines. And then we get into the officers. So some of our boards and commissions now don't have really any strata to them. So it's a group, and then we've got town staff helping them along. And so I think that maybe if we establish a chairperson, vice chair, it kind of puts a little more responsibility on the group to perhaps be setting their own agendas, to kind of be sort of directing the progress of the tasks they've been assigned. And then it outlines what some of the responsibilities of those folks would be. And then lastly, we talk about some attendance stuff. So that in a nutshell describes a template that we could then give those groups as homework so that they can then begin to fill in the blanks. If we refer back to my spreadsheet on things like, a mission statement, what are the specific projects, tasks, and priorities that you're presenting? When should you be having meetings? What does your membership and leadership look like? And then I think that just starts to create some structure for us. And I think that I'm responding to what I'm hearing council and these groups requesting. So, so with that, I think as next steps, I'd love to get some feedback from you all if you have it today. Obviously, we're missing 3 today from the meeting, so I'd like to hear back from them too, so we can certainly continue this discussion until the next meeting if we'd like. But, you know, I think this is a beginning point. There's going to be some more work to be done by those committees. And then I think we need to take a hard look too, for you all, are all these committees serving the needs that you are all hoping over time. Just because you form a committee doesn't mean you have to keep it forever. But are there certain focus areas that we are emphasizing? So, you know, the arts being one of them, you know, that did find its way into our draft strategic plan. Does it make sense to continue with the Arts Committee as it exists today, or do you modify that and hand it off to another group in some form or fashion? I think those are all questions that we need to ask each other. So with that, I'll leave it there, and happy for some feedback or suggestions moving forward.
Council?
No, I think it's a good idea to keep them all the same, or not the same, but with this new bylaws and the standardization, so that everyone knows what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree that this is a great document to help get us all on the same page and understand when meetings are and the organization. I guess as a full council, we'll want to discuss if we want to eliminate, combine any of these. I guess when I look at it on paper, it doesn't look so outrageous as when we were in just the nebulous conversation of we have so many committees and they're all over the place that I don't know if I could be convinced that anything needs to be eliminated. And then just getting everybody on the same page and having the communication strategy, I think, would be a huge step forward.
Yeah. My take, just really quickly, is that the committees in my discussions with them, I think they're hungry for the same thing, for that direction. And as evidenced from a couple of the groups that came and visited with us back in December, they laid out some, you know, tasks that they wanted to work on for 2019. And so I think they'd love to get some of that feedback on, you know, if they had 5 tasks, which 3, you know, can we focus on, or are all 5 worthy of attention in 2019? So, so we would like to bring them back, because we did have some, there was some money budgeted in 2019 for that. So we might have some concurrency with that, but we'll, you know, take input from you all on your comfort level with sort of following the communication strategy while simultaneously having these groups do some of this, you know, assigned homework. But maybe we need to have another conversation just to make sure that all of these groups are ones that you find to be beneficial still for you all.
Jackie?
I'm not feeling particularly chatty, but Ryan and I have spent literally hours talking about this, and I think that we just need to start someplace. And I think you're all aware that I have an informal mayor's cabinet, and on that cabinet, it's just basically people that I trust. And it turns out that 3 of the 5 of them are on our citizen committees, and they pretty much are saying the same things that Ryan is saying, is, you know, there's no consistency, there's no clarity on communication from council. So I think I think Ryan's on the right track here, and we just need to start so that it gets done.
Yeah, I think it's great work. Who did it? Ryan, Susan, Sarah, all Watkins?
Did what?
Who developed this document?
I did the work for the spreadsheet and the template, for the bylaws. Full disclosure, I sort of stole part of the template,
As you
from
should.
another group, and, always good not to reinvent the wheel, but then I modified it for
Yeah,
our.
but
our
this is
needs.
great. It's super solid. It's not far from a final document. Is you're thinking that you would give this to each group and they'd flesh it out?
Yeah.
And then they would flesh out the diagram, the giant diagram, which I think is great. And some of that, some of it can be at the discretion of the group. Like the green team does not need to follow Robert's Rules of Order. It's fine. You could say civil procedures or whatever. So I'd say the quicker we can bang this out, the better. It's not that hard. The one thing I had a question about is under board commission member guidelines, it says the board/commission will work only on the projects included in the yearly work program or assigned by the town council or town manager. I think we want these groups to come to us with things they think that are important or that they want to do. I just don't want to limit their discretion, so Bach, hey, you guys, have you thought about X? I don't want command and control as much.
To speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to avoid is having these groups drill down and spend a great deal of time on something, and then, months later it gets brought to council, and then council's like kind of, cold on it, and they're feeling a bit deflated as a result.
Right.
And so I did add a piece, and Susan helped me wordsmith it a bit, but it was, essentially that you've got your basic work plan for the year. If you've got another idea that comes up that just, could possibly supersede what you have, bring it back to council first. Like, do a basic outline of it. Don't
Right.
spend months and months doing it. Bring it back and say, hey, we have this other, emerging idea. What do you all think? And so we considered exactly that.
Right.
Doing
Okay.
this.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff.
One of the things that we talked about too was maybe sitting down and having a more of a roundtable discussion with the committee or the chair or whoever is going to be the designee. Like this thing of getting a two-way sort of thing going on, rather than them coming to us and us saying, we didn't ask for that and I'm sorry you wasted all this time, or just having, because we're not going to think of it, you're right, but sitting down and having a work session together to sort of kick off, what are you going to do? What is your work plan? Because what is their work plan? Some of these committees just meet and meet and meet.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and you could do it, 4 work sessions before meetings and get it done. Okay,
So there's probably some heavy lifting to do, I think, in the next couple months if we proceed with this. A lot of that luckily gets put back onto the committees to do it, but it is also, I think important to recognize the amount of time that staff puts into these groups as well, and really trying to, some of the intent as I was moving through this is thinking of ways that we might streamline staff's efforts in it. I think you can't avoid having staff involved. They're going to be requested to get information for the committees. But is there, are there some time-saving measures that we can implement? One of those may be having a little more structure within those that, you can have a chair that is putting forth a little more effort to try to come up with agendas and things like that, so.
yeah, I'd be supportive of that. We had a green team subcommittee meeting yesterday, and there was no staff. And we ran it, we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that we can give staff a break and they don't have to come to all these meetings and then we report out, that'd be great.
Yeah.
What we're already doing, I think that is gonna appease these boards a lot, is getting them in front of us regularly, talking, and this'll further that, so.
Yeah, I think so.
Anything else? Okay, I think that's it. Motion to adjourn.
Wait, I have one
Oh,
thing.
yeah,
Thank you, Auden, for doing this. You look great in that chair. Just saying.
Okay, well, don't get used to the look of it. One other thing I forgot to tell you on the electrification of this building. Town bought a clean power contract from Holy Cross so that all town buildings are clean energy. And if we electrify this building, it'll be net zero town hall.
That'd be awesome.
Which is pretty cool. The story has legs, and it'll be, the first step toward getting others in the town to do that.
Doesn't he talk like a mayor? I mean,
Okay, thank you, Jackie. No more side commentary. Please
I
raise
ask
your
a
hand
question?
when you ask to speak to me. Yeah.
good one.
Would you all like me to bring this item back to the next meeting so we can continue the discussion with the rest of council, or what's the direction for me on that?
I think you get it to the committees and
Okay.
get the committee's input on.
Okay.
Yeah, because if they fill it out, flesh it out, and here's our document, then council can review it. Let's not delay.
Right.
Sorry.
The only thing I would say is that we want a committee to go through that effort to then tell them that we're gonna dissolve their committee. That would be fun.
Right. That would be a bit of a blow. So we could wait if there are some of those ideas, that any of them need more discussion, but otherwise I'm happy to proceed, which is kind of what I think I'm hearing.
Yes.
There was another piece to that. Oh, on the future agenda, which is in here as well, we've been asking for potentially a special meeting on the 23rd, was it, Susan? And so the point of that would be to have some interaction with committees, and we can just post on that one? Okay. So that we can just start following that communication strategy. Post has, I think they presented five ideas for this next year, and then I think we have a couple of our other committees that have done similar things. So we kind of wanted to I think they're hungry for that feedback, like what do you think of our ideas? So if it's okay with you all, we'll start to schedule those. We've got that one special meeting, I guess that's just for post, but then the others we'd probably do in the form of like work sessions, or something along those lines before the meeting.
So do we have something that's supposed to be on our calendars now?
We're trying to schedule that. So that's what I want to know from you guys is, do you have a strong feeling about not hearing from any committees until this task is done? Or is it okay to get some feedback, hear from the committees and you giving them direction while simultaneously they're working on this?
That one.
So
I think
that's
both.
what I'm a little,
Chew gum and walk at the same time.
great. We'll do it.
I think the committees want.
Okay.
They want to get in front of us.
Yeah.
They want their ideas shared, so
They do.
I don't want to let them leave it hanging.
Cool. Thanks.
Great. Anything else?
Do we have new tasks for 2019?
Yeah, this is following up on Emmett's first meeting in 2019, so.
Hey, listen, I just wanted,
Just
I
asking.
liked going through that, and that's a nice checklist.
It's good.
and
You guys are you
Good job,
will
Cole.
have the new one in the form of the strategic plan that has some new ideas and new tasks for 2019, so.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move the town council adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Oh, Ryan,